Hey guys, and welcome back to another set of anatomy notes. Today we're going to be moving a little bit away from the respiratory breathing stuff that we were talking about the other week and get more into the actual system that controls not only your breathing, but also all your movements, all your thoughts, your heart beating, everything that happens in your body, which is controlled by the nervous system. Your brain, your spine, all the nerves going through your fingers and your toes are all connected and are all sending messages back and forth from one another. So with that, let's get into some of the major kind of cells and organs that are at play with our nervous system. All right, so the nervous system is extremely complex. There's a lot going on in it. And so today we're going to focus on the nerve cells and the different important groups of nervous system organs that help to coordinate all the function and action inside of your body. So the nervous system is basically this big network of cells, tissues, and organs that communicate with each other, allow you to take in information from your environment, react to it in some way, and perform some of your basic life activities. So breathing, heart beating, digestion, all of that is controlled in some part by the nervous system. It's also what allows us to see pictures and hear sounds and smell and taste different scents and odors. All of that is due to information that our nervous system is picking up from and acting upon from our outside environment. So there's sort of four major functions that the nervous system completes in our body. We use our nervous system for sensing the world. So either sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, all of these are ways that our nervous system allows us to take in information from the world around us. It then transmits that information, so it sends it through all these different little nerves up into our spine and our brain, and then back out into our muscles and our cells. The brain is what processes all of this information. So all of the processing and kind of computing that goes on inside the nervous system is in our brain. And then it uses that information that we sensed earlier and transmitted to the brain in order to produce a response, cause some sort of change in your muscles, your glands, something in your body that's responding to the outside information. So the nerve cell that controls all this information, is passing it back and forth, is known as a neuron. So the neuron is the scientific name for the nerve cells. So they take in what are called electrochemical messages, meaning that it's electrical charges not based on negative atoms like electrons, but based on different positive and negative chemicals moving back and forth. And it sends these messages all around the body. So there's millions of nerve cells in your body that are all connected from each other, all the way from the tips of your toes to the top of your head. And they are constantly sending information back and forth from one to the other. So neurons are our nerve cells. There are a couple different major parts of the neurons that's going to be important for you guys to know. We have the dendrites over here. So the dendrites are like these little kind of tree-looking branches coming off of one end of the nerve. And they are what's actually responsible for taking in a signal or information, usually from other nerve cells that are around. We have the cell body. So that's the kind of middle part of the nerve that includes important structures and organelles like the nucleus and ribosomes, mitochondria, and stuff like that. We have the axon, which is this kind of big, long arm that stretches from one side of the nerve to the other. This is what's actually going to carry our signal from the dendrite part of the cell to the other part of the cell. And then we have our axon terminals down here. So these guys are what is going to send that information from this nerve cell to kind of the next nerve cell in line. So our signal through our nerve is essentially moving something kind of like this. So it comes in from the dendrites, is passed through the cell body and along the axon to the axon terminal over here. There are a couple different other parts of the neuron that we're not going to super get into. One of the only other important parts to know is this kind of myelin right here. So these little yellow blobs are coating of a protein called myelin that kind of acts as insulation for the nerve cell and also helps with getting the signal to travel faster. So a nerve cell that has myelin around it can send a signal hundreds of times faster than a nerve cell that does not have this myelin. But the major things to remember are the dendrite, the cell body, the axon, and the axon terminal down here. So, like I mentioned before, the cell body of the neuron is kind of the main, like, centralized little body of the neuron. It contains a whole bunch of the important structures that go into like a normal cell. So like your nucleus, your mitochondria, your ribosomes, your endoplasmic reticulum, your Golgi body, stuff like that is going to be found in the cell body of the neuron. The dendrites were all those little branches kind of off of the cell body, and they are what take in the signal and move it through the cell body. So they take it from the nerve cells or the sensory cells that are on the outside of the nerve cell, the neuron, and move those to the cell body and through the rest of the nerve. And then the axon is that super kind of elongated arm that's taking those impulses away from the cell body and down to somewhere else towards the end part of that axon, that terminal area, where that signal is then going to be passed on to kind of the next nerve cell in line, or maybe to the brain cell or to the muscle cell that this neuron is attached to. So cell body in the kind of central structure, the dendrites all kind of branching off the edge, and then the axon is that big long arm carrying the signal away from the cell body. So here's another look at our neuron. We have our cell body with all of our different parts inside, the dendrites, these little branches where the signal is coming in from, and then this axon that's carrying the signal away, and then this axon terminal, or these terminal branches where one cell kind of connects to the other cell. So the axon terminal branches of one cell are going to pass that signal to the dendrites of the next nerve cell in line. And that's how a signal gets passed from one area of your body to the next. There are thousands and millions of nerve cells that are all lined up to go from your toes up to your spinal cord. And so they're just carrying the signal one after the other up into your spine and your brain. So there's not just one single type of neuron that's present in your body. There are actually three major types of neurons that we're going to talk about in these notes. Luckily, the nice thing about these is that the name of the neuron really well describes what it does. So we have sensory neurons, which are kind of our detector neurons. They are what are taking in signals. So you have a lot of these in your eyes, in your ears, in your tongue, on the surface of your skin. And these are going to carry that signal from your touch, your sight, or your taste, from that sensory receptor all the way up into your spinal cord and your brain. Interneurons are kind of the in-between neurons. They are what make up your spine and your brain. And they kind of take this signal, send it to the brain, and then carry it back out through the motor neurons. So the motor neurons are what connect to your muscles. And they are what take that brain signal and turn it into a contraction in your muscles that allows you to talk, to move your fingers and your arms and your legs, that keep your heart beating, that keep the food in your stomach moving along, that make your diaphragm contract and relax. That all happens due to motor neurons. So they're carrying that message away from your brain and your spine to the rest of your body. So the sensory neurons take in information and send that to your spine and your brain. The inner neurons are in your spine and your brain, and they send that message kind of up to your brain and then back down. And the inner neurons will send that message out to your motor neurons. And those are what go out from your spine and connect to the different muscles in your body to create some sort of action, some sort of response in your muscles. So here are what some of the different neurons might look like. They all have the same basic structure, but sometimes set up a little bit differently. So our motor neurons and our sensory neurons are what are going through our arms and our legs and our torso. They've got these dendrites, or in the case of a sensory neuron, maybe they're connected directly into a little receptor cell, like a touch or a taste receptor up here. They've got these big, long axons that are carrying that information. Either they're taking it, in the case of a motor neuron, maybe they're taking it to a muscle cell. So this is like a muscle cell or muscle tissue right here that's going to react to the signal it gets from the motor neuron. The sensory neuron is passing all of this information along to the next sensory neuron in line until we get to the interneuron. And so the interneuron is what's inside of your spine and takes that information up to your brain and then back down and out to your motor neuron. So let's see what happens and how this path kind of plays out in terms of you getting injured by something. So this is called a reflex arc, meaning that it's automatic. So your brain doesn't even actually have to come into play for this reflex arc to pan out. It is used a lot for pain receptors in order to get our body away from something that's causing us pain before too much damage is done. So in this case, we have some skin right here that has some sensory nerves plugged into it. And what happens is that we step on a nail. So this nail goes into our foot. It damages our skin cells, which sends a signal down the sensory neuron, essentially saying, ow, we've been damaged, ow, something's wrong, ow, please send help. The sensory neuron takes that information and carries it to our spinal cord, which is made up of a whole bunch of interneurons. That interneuron will be triggered, and due to the pain that's coming in, it will immediately send out a signal to our motor neuron. So the interneuron will immediately be like, oh, we've got to get that foot out of there. It'll send a signal down the motor neuron that controls part of the muscle in your foot and your leg. And once this system of motor neurons has connected back to your leg will jerk up and move your foot away from the pain. So our sensory neuron took in that sensory information of touch and pain, sent it to our spinal cord. The interneuron relayed that information directly to the motor neuron, and our motor neuron was able to cause a response, a reaction in our muscle cells and cause our foot to move up and away from that nail that's causing it pain on the ground. So the sensory neuron, the interneuron, and the motor neuron all working together in order to get this response happening. Another famous example of this that you'll see tested at the doctor's office a lot is the reflex of the ligament just below your knee, the patellar tendon. So inside the patellar tendon, there are some sensory neurons that get triggered when the little orange hammer that the doctor uses hits it. These sensory neurons send this trigger to your spine, where the inner neuron takes that information and sends it to the motor neuron, which tenses up the quadriceps muscle and the top of your leg, and is what causes that response of kicking out. So the reason why we get this kicking reflex is just because hitting the knee in this particular spot triggers these certain sensory neurons, which causes this reflex of your leg kicking when it gets stimulated there. Again, sensory neuron, inner neuron, and motor neuron all working together at this almost lightning speed. So those are kind of the main cells that are involved in the nervous system. But what about some of the major organs? How can we put sort of the different areas of our body and the different areas of our nervous system into groups? So there are two major groups of kind of divisions in your nervous system. There is the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system is made up of your brain and your spinal cord. Again, it's central because it's kind of central in your body. And then the peripheral nervous system is all of the nerve cells that kind of stretch out in your arms and your legs and your torso. And so the central is just the brain and spine in the middle, and then the peripheral is all the stuff kind of branching out of there. Part of the peripheral nervous system is the autonomic nervous system, and we'll talk about what exactly that means in just a little bit. But the main things to remember for right now are the central nervous system, the CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, the PNS. So the central nervous system, your brain, and your spinal cord. This is what is taking in that information from your sensory nerves, processing it in your brain, and then sending that information out into your motor nerves. So it's receiving and sending signals to your outer nerves, your peripheral nervous system. We've got our brain, the main control center, up at the top, and then our spinal cord, which connects to our brain and sends out that information. It kind of travels the length of our body so that we can send out stuff to our toes and our legs and our arms and fingers in a really quick and precise manner. So we get information into our central nervous system from those sensory nerve cells. It determines inside of our brain what to do with that information that we just received. And then it sends that signal of what to do out through our motor neurons to our muscle cells. It also is where our memory is stored inside of the brain, and it's how we think. So the way we think through different problems or different issues that we're facing is due to activation of different parts of the brain and the central nervous system. So the spine is the other major part of our central nervous system. And so the vertebrae are your actual bones that protect your spinal cord. So the spinal cord is not your backbone that runs up and down the central part of your back. It is the tube of nerves that travels up and down your back and is protected by the backbone. So the vertebrae is all of the different little backbones that are back there. And they are what protect the spinal cord on the inside. So the spinal cord is kind of made up of two different sections called gray matter and white matter. So gray matter is all of the cell bodies. So there are millions of cells running up and down through the spine. The gray matter, so they've all kind of adapted to host their cell bodies in this gray matter part in the middle. And then the white matter in this picture is kind of more yellowy matter. This is all of those myelinated sheaths on the outside. So all of those axons are around the outside of the gray matter, the cell bodies, and those are what's carrying the information up and down through your spine. And so your central nervous system in your spine right here, so this is kind of the central, and then these guys out here are our peripheral nerves. So the peripheral nervous system connects directly into our central nervous system in this spinal cord area right here. So the brain, we're actually going to talk about a little bit more later on, but there's kind of three major areas of the brain. We have our hindbrain, which is kind of this area down at the base of the skull. This is what carries out a lot of our basic body functions like digestion, breathing, heart beating. All of that is controlled by this hindbrain kind of area. The midbrain in here coordinates a lot of our signals. So a lot of the taste and sight and sound information that's coming in is sort of initially handled and processed by our midbrain. And then the forebrain is the part that everybody's the most familiar with. It's kind of the big, wrinkly, gray part up at the top of the brain. And this is where we do a lot of thinking. We store memories. It processes a lot of the more complex signals that we get in. And it's divided up into a couple different sections itself. Those we'll talk about a little bit later on. But for now, the major thing to remember is we have the hindbrain down here, the midbrain right here, and the forebrain is kind of this top part up here. So that was our central nervous system. We have our brain with a lot of different parts that we'll talk about later, and the spinal cord carrying that information out to the body. So the peripheral nervous system is where those nerve cells are actually stimulated and bring in and send out the information from the central nervous system. So the peripheral sends information to the central nervous system, and then the central nervous system sends signals to the peripheral. And so we can kind of divide up the peripheral nervous system into two general categories. There's the autonomic part of the peripheral nervous system, and this is all of the stuff that's kind of automated in our body. So like the auto there means that our body automatically does it. So like breathing, heart beating, moving food through your stomach and intestines, all of that we don't have any direct control over. It's all on autopilot, so we call it the autonomic system. The somatic part of the peripheral nervous system, this is the stuff that we do have control over. So the fact that I'm able to blink or turn my head or wiggle my fingers or my toes or flex my muscles, that's due to the somatic nervous system. This is what we are able to control directly as part of our nerves and our muscles. So the peripheral, again, is just all of the nerves that are connecting out to our fingers and our toes and our torso. out of that central nervous system in our spinal cord and our brain. So it's basically all of the neurons and organs that are outside of the spine and brain. So we're sending signals to that central nervous system. We're receiving signals and muscle signals from central nervous system, and we're stimulating muscles and different types of glands and stuff inside of our body. So like I mentioned earlier, the somatic nervous system is controlled by voluntary movements in our muscles. So that means things that we can do ourselves, we have control over. So reflexes are also part of the somatic nervous system. Even though it's not something that maybe we're directly controlling, it still involves muscles that we have control over, whether that's in our feet, our arms, our legs, our fingers. All of this is controlled directly by us and our thoughts. And so it's part of the somatic nervous system. These voluntary movements, the stuff that we are either doing or not doing depending on if we want to do it. The autonomic nervous system, on the other hand, is all the stuff that we do not directly control. So any involuntary responses involving organs, glands, smooth muscles, like your stomach, that basically our brain is able to put on autopilot. So we're not able to kind of control the muscles in our throat or in our stomach as the food moves through. Our body just handles that automatically. Same thing with like your heart beating. Obviously, it would be a big toll on your brain if every single second of every day we had to think and beat and relax, beat, relax, beat, relax, beat, relax. That would be too much. And so the brain is able to make this automatically happen through this autonomic nervous system. So we just get these pulses in our heart every second or so in order to keep our blood flowing and keep us alive. So everything that is involuntary, is out of our control, is the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic system can be kind of split up into two different general groups called the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic system. So the parasympathetic system is like the rest and relax system. So this is the system that comes into play when we're resting or relaxing, meditating, or eating especially is a good one. And so this is automatic control of stuff that helps us to kind of relax and slow down and get ready for a big meal. So our saliva in our mouth will start flowing. Our heartbeat slows down. So we don't in any sort of dangerous situation, so we can kind of relax our heart beating. Our stomach starts to get moving, and so peristalsis is that movement of the esophagus and stomach to get food going, and it starts to secreting juices in order to get ready for our food that's coming in. On the other side, the sympathetic nervous system, this is sometimes referred to as your fight or flight response. So this is when the body feels like it's in stress or danger, and your body's assuming that you're about to have to fight something or get yourself out of the dangerous situation. So all these things start happening. Your pupil starts dilating, so your eyes open up so you can get more light in there so you can see better if it's dark. Your heart rate starts accelerating, and the bronchi in your lungs dilate, meaning that they open up so you can get more oxygen into your lungs, and your heartbeat is going faster. So you're moving blood around your body more quickly, you're getting oxygen more quickly to the muscles. It shuts down your digestive system, so your stomach and your liver sort of come to a standstill. It gets your pancreas and other glands in your body to start secreting adrenaline, so that hormone that makes you like really tense and ready to go and ready to do something. That gets secreted as part of the sympathetic system. It inhibits your bladder contraction, so it prevents you from having to go to the bathroom. So that's one less thing you have to worry about because your body is responding to some sort of perceived threat or danger. So your parasympathetic is all about resting, eating, relaxing, whereas your sympathetic is the fight or flight, getting ready for some sort of danger that your body thinks is about to happen. So again, sympathetic is fight or flight. So your eyes get big, your heart starts beating fast, adrenaline is flowing, your digestion shuts down because we don't want to be putting extra energy into digesting food. We want to be moving and fighting and running or something. This is the sympathetic division of that autonomic nervous system. So again, you do not have any direct control over any of this. You cannot control when your stomach starts and stops or when adrenaline is released. That all happens automatically as part of information that your brain is taking in and processing. And then your parasympathetic, so I always try to remember it by the R in parasympathetic, is your rest and relax, or your rest and ruminate response. So your body's in low stress, maybe you are about to start getting ready to eat, so your saliva in your mouth starts going, your stomach starts to get things moving and is putting out those enzymes and that acid. Your heart is beating less fast because now we don't have to spend a lot of energy making our heart go, go, go. Your pupils constrict a little bit, so now we don't need to worry about taking in tons of light. We can kind of get everything relaxed, get everything calmed down, and start the process for getting digestion going and eating a whole bunch of hopefully really nice and filling and tasty food. So if we put all the parts of our nervous system together, we have our central nervous system with our brain and our spinal cord, and then our peripheral nervous system with nerves that either go directly into our head or that go to the spine first. So we get some sort of sensory information from our world. So our sensory nerves are triggered. They send signals to the inner neurons and our spine and our head. These travel up the spinal cord and interact with the neurons in our brain. Our brain makes some sort of decision about what to do. It sees, it sees some danger, it's getting ready, it thinks that something is going to happen, or it sees some food and it wants us to get ready to start eating. It then sends that signal out through the spinal cord or directly to the cranial nerves and the peripheral nervous system. And then those will then activate our autonomic nerves in order to get us to rest or fight or flight. Or if we need to do some sort of movement or move our body or take some sort of action, they stimulate our somatic or our voluntary nerves. So a signal comes in, gets sent up to the central nervous system, and then the reaction to that signal gets sent back out to the peripheral nervous system and to one of our two types of motor nerves that we have. All right. So that is our notes for this section. Some of the major takeaways are the different parts of the neuron with those dendrites, cell body, axon, and the terminal. The different types of neurons that we have with our sensory neurons, interneurons, and motor neurons, and how the different nervous systems in our body play out. The sensory nervous system with the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system with our somatic nerves, which control our movements, or our autonomic nerves, which can either control our sympathetic response of fight or flight, or our parasympathetic response of rest and relax. So hopefully that explains all the different cells and organs in the nervous system pretty well. Luckily for you guys, the homework that goes along with these nerves is pretty simple and straightforward. So let's take a look at that really quick. Here we go, this guy. So for our nervous system worksheet, don't worry about doing any of this coloring part right here. You don't have to do any coloring on yours. What you do have to do is, for the first part, label the following nerve cell diagram. So we have the axon, the myelin sheath, the cell body, the dendrites, the muscle fibers, and the axon terminals. So just label and draw an arrow to all those different parts on our little picture down here. Again, you can skip over the coloring part. Don't worry about doing that. And then the second part of the worksheet is just matching up the different types of neurons with their function. So if it is our motor neuron, our sensory neuron, or our relay neuron, so this worksheet uses a different word for interneuron. A relay neuron and interneuron are the same thing, the same idea. And so you're going to write down which type of neuron goes with the function that it specifies over in the boxes on the right over here. Like I said, pretty simple kind of overview of some of the different parts of the nervous system that we talked about today. Hopefully you guys found all that information useful and kind of interesting. I think it is, at least. So remember, if you have any questions about anything, you can always reach out to me by sending me a text message, sending me an email, coming to the Google Zoom or the Zoom office hours, or by writing your question directly on the assignment on the Google Classroom. When you're ready to go through your assignment, fill it out and turn it in, you can always send a picture of it to my cell number, send a picture of it to my email, or upload a picture of it or the document itself onto the assignment on the Google Classroom. That's all that we're going over today for the nervous system, the different cells and organs that make it up. Again, please reach out to me if you have any questions, but that'll be all for now. Now I'll see you guys for our next set of notes next time.